All right, welcome everyone to week 11, brought to you not live, but pre-recorded from my house, from my home office. Week 11, today we're covering AODA assessments, family interventions, and group interventions. It's a bit of a grab bag week, but we're going to work through those topics one by one. First, some reminders. Your SOAP note from last week should be in. Quiz 4 is now open and due next week. A reminder to do discussion board questions, 2 questions and 1 response in by next week. There's also 4 articles to be read. We're talking about trauma and resilience next week. And group presentations are on December 9th, our last week of class, but that's coming up quick. So make sure and schedule time with your group to be ready for that. And I added this picture so you could think of me sitting at home on my computer. That's not really me, but next. Okay. AODA assessments, diving in. Substance abuse, abstinence versus harm reduction. And we got into this a little bit in discussion earlier in the semester, but let's dive in further this week, comparing abstinence models versus harm reduction. So an abstinence model posits that a person needs to completely remove the addictive substance from their life. This is typically considered more disease-based, and the client generally has a lack of choice in the matter. This is more prevalent in the United States, considered fairly prevalent even now. Some examples you can see here: AA, the Minnesota model. There's lots of methodologies that are still supporting only abstinence. Different than harm reduction. Harm reduction has been around for decades, but really saw a resurgence due to AIDS epidemic surrounding sexual practices and drug use. That's when it really came to light. So risk reduction is all about having practical strategies that remove the negative consequence of drug use and unsafe behaviors by using a continuum of strategies. So it's a little more gray, not black and white, from safer use up to abstinence. The focus is not on the drug or alcohol behavior itself, but the harm associated with it. Many clients have not made a decision to stop using or may state that they wish to continue to use drugs, but they do need assistance. They're open to help, and then we would step in with harm reduction. Abstinence is part of harm reduction strategy, so there is some overlap. If we're meeting the client where they're at, if abstinence is where they're at, that could be part of our harm reduction response. So not everyone is in a place to completely abstain. Therefore, it's best to take steps to reduce the risk to the person and others when the individual chooses to use their addictive substance of choice. So how do we intervene using this harm reduction approach? We're going to start where the client is, meeting the client where they're at. So they might be at a point of recovery readiness. And at that point, we're really going to focus on psychoeducation. So our client wants to stop, but they're not ready. Think about our stages of change. They might be pre-contemplative. So we're going to focus on identifying how their use exacerbates their symptoms. How is this interfering with their life? Interfering with practicing safer sex, interfering with their medication adherence, interfering in whatever their goals are. So we're not minimizing or ignoring the harm and danger associated with drug use, but we are meeting that client where they're at and giving a lot of psychoeducation. Maybe that person is needing moderation management and controlled use. So we're going to try and reduce consumption in a way that reduces harm, in a way that focuses on those negative consequences. So, for example, only on weekends this person might use, or when they're not driving a car. So we're controlling the situations of use, controlling the episodes of use. An example of moderation management might be our needle exchange programs. All right, substitution therapy. So substitution therapy, also fairly popular and just as controversial. Replacing heroin with methadone, use of naltrexone, using more pharmaceutically pure methods is considered substitution therapy. And then again, if our client is ready to stop, if they are at that harm elimination abstinence readiness, then we're going to engage in traditional therapies. When someone's ready to stop, we'll just eliminate the harm completely. Okay, so the model we're focusing on today that fits within harm reduction is SBIRT. So SBIRT stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. If we were in class, I would have you all talk about how you use SBIRT at your field placements or at your places of work, who has been exposed to this, who's tried it, who's been trained in it. You could comment down below, but I don't think we actually have that ability in Canvas. So you can let me know if you want to talk more about SBIRT and how you use it. SBIRT is first and foremost a public health approach to the delivery of early intervention for substance misuse. Typically integrated into public health settings, primary care, other community-based organizations, initial point of access settings, so EAP, not usually used in alcohol and drug treatment settings. So this is used everywhere where clients come into contact with other services. It's different than intensive specialty alcohol care or drug treatment care. It's more of an upstream model. So we're catching people upstream. It's early intervention focused. So you're preventing the need for more intensive substance misuse intervention or treatment later. While there are lots of challenges, there's also a lot of optimism about reducing addiction and reducing misuse of drugs and alcohol, including use of programs like SBIRT to prevent substance use disorders. There's clear precedent. I like this because it builds hope. The 1964 Surgeon General's report on smoking and health, for example, and think of all the progress that we made in this country. We can reduce use, misuse, and addiction when we focus our efforts. It is possible. Okay, SBIRT components. SBIRT components are screening for substance misuse, which is universal. So all individuals in the setting where they're screened are using validated question measures, and we'll talk more about those. Another component is brief intervention for at-risk substance users, meaning substance use above low-risk guidelines. And brief intervention is generally 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes in length. So brief really does mean brief with SBIRT. And then referral to specialty treatment for individuals with probable substance use disorders. The brief intervention component, that 5 to 10 minutes, which really is at the heart of the SBIRT model, is implemented with at-risk substance users, a larger group than individuals with substance use disorders. So broader than DSM-5 diagnosis. Historically, and even now, this at-risk group has not received appropriate intervention services, if any services at all. So again, we're upstream, proactive, preventative, looking at users who are at risk, not just disordered. Is SBIRT effective? Is it efficacious? Yes, the answer is yes. SBIRT-related research has been conducted for over 25 years with primary care physicians and other health personnel implementing brief intervention. So I mentioned earlier that SBIRT is used in all kinds of different settings. A big one that you'll find is in the medical physical health field. So lots of clinics use this. I used SBIRT when I was administering PCIT with families. So again, they're not there to see me for SBIRT, but as part of my intake, I was completing the screening. So used in lots of different settings, and it is effective. So in a recent SAMHSA-funded SBIRT service program, heavy alcohol use, which is a type of at-risk alcohol use, was almost 40% lower, 40% drop, and illicit drug use almost 70% lower at follow-up. It's also found to be cost effective. So think about when you're making a pitch to implement SBIRT into your practice, how cost effective it is. One research study, and this was actually right here in Wisconsin, found a 4-to-1 return on investment. 4-to-1 in implementing screening and brief intervention in a 1-year period, benefiting not only the clients, but also the healthcare system in terms of saving healthcare costs and society. Think about reduction in crime and that kind of thing and all the savings that are there. The science is solid, especially for primary care settings, and SBIRT training is now beginning to roll out on that national level. Why is SBIRT important? Alcohol and other drug use are major preventable public health problems. Alcohol ranks as the 3rd leading actual cause of death in the U.S. By the way, what is number 1? Tobacco. Tobacco use is the number 1 actual cause of death in the U.S. Wisconsin, too, we know we have our brewing history and our tavern culture. Think about our baseball team. We're literally called the Brewers. It's everywhere. Wisconsin's high, if not number 1, on national alcohol problems, such as prevalence of driving while intoxicated. In a recent study, a little over 20% of Wisconsin adults in primary care settings were estimated to be consuming alcohol at risky levels. Here's an example, an SBIRT workflow in a practice setting. So there's typically a team approach. Typically in trainings for SBIRT, there are professionals from multiple disciplines that are trained on SBIRT. You might have your front desk staff or paraprofessionals doing your pre-screening or your screening, and then yourself as the social worker or other practitioners are administering the brief intervention. So that's not uncommon to find that team approach. Okay, some people worry that clients will be annoyed or that it feels like a hassle for everyone involved. Like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't seeing clients coming to me for substance use. They were coming to me for something else. They weren't necessarily expecting SBIRT. SBIRT is opportunistic. It is. Perhaps surprisingly, in most cases, it will not annoy patients. So we have research on this. Patients who were asked agreed that they would answer honestly. They should feel free to ask. They would not be annoyed or embarrassed. Just as a side note, I thought this was interesting. If asking about substance use is not the most sensitive question, what is the most sensitive question most likely you can ask someone? It's family income. It's kind of interesting. That's the most sensitive area to ask about, family income. Okay, next we're going to cover some key SBIRT concepts. The first key concept is that in SBIRT there's a continuum of substance use severity. Because SBIRT is applied in settings other than specialty alcohol and other drug treatment settings, patients or clients present along that continuum. This figure here, for example, represents alcohol users by proportion in the U.S. population. Roughly 25% of the population at times use alcohol in risky, meaning hazardous or harmful ways, or have an alcohol use disorder, so uncontrolled use. And individuals in those two groups, so hazardous and harmful, and probable alcohol use disorder, are using alcohol above the U.S. low-risk guidelines. And that is who we are primarily targeting with SBIRT, with our brief intervention. I'm going to take a drink of my tea now. I'm going to step away so you don't hear it so loudly in your ears. Hang on. Okay. Back to adults and what is too much alcohol or risky alcohol use. So here is our chart, and sometimes this little bit of psychoeducation is powerful in itself, and it surprises people. So risky alcohol use is more than 4 drinks for men on any given day. Risky alcohol use for women is more than 3 drinks on any given day. So you can see that middle column there. If these seem low to you, you're not alone. It's very common to have in mind. People think that it's higher numbers. And risky alcohol use is defined not only as exceeding any given day amounts, but also weekly amounts. Again, for men, more than 4 standard drinks on any given day, more than 14 standard drinks in a week. For women, again, more than 3 on any given day, more than 7 in a week. Low-risk alcohol use, or being within the U.S. low-risk drinking guidelines, is less than these limits. And if you need to clarify for a client what a standard drink is a bottle or can of beer, a glass of wine, or a shot of hard liquor. Each of these contain approximately 14 grams of pure alcohol. These are some facts that I just wanted to fit in somewhere about illicit drug use. Although the policy environment is certainly changing, marijuana is the most commonly used illicit drug, has been connected to work-related issues, tardiness, absences. In addition, psychotherapeutics for non-medical reasons, including pain medication, have more than double the rates of use when compared to cocaine and heroin use combined. Heroin is actually the least commonly used drug overall. This was from 2014 data, despite having gained a lot of recent media attention. These are all national data. In Wisconsin, illicit drug use is lower than the national average. It's still an issue to be addressed. And at the same time, that overall risky alcohol use is still our main issue, still reigning supreme in Wisconsin. Okay, SBIRT process. SBIRT process is shown here. You can see that low risk use leads to information giving, hazardous use leads to the brief intervention, harmful use leads to the brief intervention and brief treatment, and disorder use, when it's indicated, leads to the brief intervention and referral to treatment. Those hazardous and harmful users, again, the 2 groups that we're primarily targeting when we use SBIRT. So we're going to go through each of the steps of SBIRT, starting with engagement. An important part of this step is asking permission to have the client complete the substance use screening measure. I did upload the SBIRT screening into Canvas, so those are available to you to follow along with the steps. So starting with engagement, we're introducing ourselves on the screen. We are setting a respectful and collaborative tone, and again, always asking permission. Next is screening, which could include pre-screening. We'll talk about that next. And then the screening instruments. We are recommending the audit and the DAST. Those are also uploaded into Canvas and available to you. And then finally, in this step, you're going to score and interpret it. So your key communication skill here is asking. You're asking the questions. And these instruments can be administered either via interview, or the client can self-report, paper and pencil, or on the computer. So if you wanted to use a pre-screening, this is an even briefer yet valid, for example, 1-item screening question. So these could be incorporated into your intake, into a health and wellness questionnaire, could be completed in the waiting area. And if a person is negative on the pre-screening item, SBIRT stops. So you are done right there. If it's positive, then you continue with the full screening. Then you do the audit or the DAST. And this strategy might make good sense because we know that 75% of individuals are negative for substance misuse. And so you're saving time when you're stopping with 75% of people and not going further. The remaining 25% who need the SBIRT process, you're going to administer the audit and or the DAST. So that can be a real time saver too. What do the pre-screens look like? Here is the alcohol pre-screen. Do you sometimes drink beer, wine, or other alcoholic beverages? If they answer yes, how many times in the past year have you had 5 for men or 4 for women or individuals over 65 or more drinks in a day? And if we have a yes to that, then we're moving on to our full alcohol screen. Sometimes individuals do not consider beer to be an alcoholic beverage. That is something to be aware of. And so then you would want to make sure and ask that first question just that way. Do you sometimes drink beer, wine, or other alcoholic beverages? Also, we know that individuals who smoke, especially heavily, tend to drink heavily as well. So based on smoking behavior alone, we might skip alcohol pre-screen and go right into our full screening. This is an option. So there might be other ways to pre-screen, but you can use these pre-screening questions for alcohol. For drug pre-screens, we use how many times in the past year have you used an illegal drug or used a prescription medication for non-medical reasons. If we have to clarify non-medical reasons, you could say, for instance, because of the experience or feelings it caused. And then if we have a yes, we are moving on to our full drug screen. And again, you might need to give clarification that illegal drug also does include marijuana use. Here are those full screens, 10 questions each. I did upload those on Canvas, like I said. And these are commonly used validated questionnaires. Then we score them. So in terms of scoring the audit, each of the 10 items has a scoring range of 0 to 4. And then you add them up. There's a scoring range from 0 to 40. And then those correspond to a category type or an interpretation of alcohol use as seen in this table. It also varies a little bit by gender for the low risk and hazardous use groups. In scoring the DAST, each of the 10 items is answered by the client either yes or no, and each yes is a 1 and each no is a 0. Item 3, if you're looking at the DAST, is reverse scored. So that's important to note. And this scoring range is 0 to 10. And then they correspond to the categories you can see from the table. Okay, so that is our pre-screening and then screening. Step 3, we're going to raise the subject of substance use and provide feedback. Giving feedback, in particular personalized feedback, based on the client's screening results and the screening items endorsed, is a central element of effective brief interventions. And we're going to use the elicit, provide, elicit framework when we're providing feedback. It's okay to share concerns with a patient or a client about their substance use. The key is to do it with their permission. So we're going to start the reflective discussion by asking permission of our clients to even have the conversation. Would it be all right with you to spend a few minutes discussing the results of the survey you just completed? I'm going to say that again. So an example of asking permission. Would it be all right with you to spend a few minutes discussing the results of the wellness survey you just completed in the waiting room? So at this point, we are informing and we're listening. I'm going to give some motivational interviewing reminders. These are things we've already talked about, but you're really leaning hard on motivational interviewing in steps 3 and 4 of SBIRT. So we know that change talk is at the heart of MI, and you can elicit that change talk by the questions you ask. Here's some examples. You've cut down on your drinking before. What made that work for you then? That's actually a solution-focused question. That's a nice one. What are some reasons you've thought about making a change? If you woke up tomorrow and things were different, what would it look like? We want to elicit that change talk. Here is our darn cat. So both the preparatory change talk and their implementing change talk. Desire, ability, reason, and need. and their commitment, activation, and steps that they're already taking. Darn cat. We're eliciting all of our change talk. In order to, step 4, enhance motivation. So step 4 of the SBIRT protocol is to enhance motivation on a target substance, which is first and foremost based on the client choice. It might be the substance with the highest risk level. To enhance motivation, you could use the importance ruler for motivational interviewing, which is designed to draw out change talk. So you can literally show them the ruler. I've seen some clinics that use actual rulers that are made from 0 to 10. And they say on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is not at all important and 10 is extremely important, how important would you say it is for you to change your drinking, to change your drug use? And then they give you a number, and then you have to say the follow-up, why are you at this and not a 0? And that answer is typically change talk. And then when we're hearing change talk, we're going to make sure to really reflect that. We're going to amplify that a lot. We can use our double-sided reflections here. We've talked about these a lot this semester. So the client says, I don't know what the big deal is about coming home from work, relaxing on the couch, having a few beers. Everybody's making too big a deal about this. And then you would say, on the one hand, it seems pretty harmless to you to come home after a tough day and kick back on the couch with a few beers. And at the same time, you've mentioned a desire to start exercising more and getting the blood pressure under control. Do I have that right? So, the social worker did reflect the stuck sustained talk briefly, and then added and then ended with the change talk, ended with the talk that moves the conversation forward towards change. I like the do I have that right too, the checking in at the end. I'm not going to play this now, but if you would like to see a demonstration, this is our very own Dr. Berger doing a video demonstration. So the YouTube link is in the PowerPoint. Feel free to watch that on your own. The biggest predictor of making a behavioral change, the breadth and depth of change talk. So what does this mean? We evoke, 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 evoke. People talk themselves into change. Final step of SBIRT is negotiate and advise. So you're going to collaboratively develop a change goal that's specific and measurable. You can restate the client connection made between substance use and their health, and then ask what's the next step. This might result in a use reduction goal. So again, we're following a harm reduction model. This might involve taking steps towards treatment. And we give information with permission. And we might have a client who is not willing to either make or consider a change. And that's okay. We're going to leave the door open for later. So we're always going to end with, that's okay, maybe some other time. Or call me at any point. We're always going to end with leaving the door open if that's the case. We're always going to follow up. So if we are having a warm handoff to a treatment provider, we're going to make sure and follow up every time. And thanking our client for their time. Okay, so that was SBIRT and all 5 steps of the protocol. Now we will move on to family interventions. Like I said, there's a variety of topics tonight. These aren't necessarily related, but we needed to make sure and cover them. Starting with systems theory and family intervention. We're in week 11. I thought we were done with theory talk. Nope, we're not done. We're still talking about theoretical basis and how they back up our interventions. So with systems theory, and family work specifically, we're going to talk about boundaries. We know that a healthy system has semi-permeable boundaries, and that defines how the system interacts with other systems. all systems have homeostasis. Some systems have scapegoats who exhibit atypical behavior. So think to yourself, what experience do you have working with families? Have you seen evidence of scapegoats or clients who exhibit behaviors that challenge that family homeostasis, who are upsetting the system? We talked about the mobile, like above a baby's crib, or the ripple effect. So when you think about systems theory, if one person is upsetting that homeostasis, then it is going to impact everyone else around them. Key rules. So when we're thinking about work with families and we're thinking about work with groups, all of these rules apply. And we want to have an understanding of these before we intervene. So interactions are complex. This is what makes this work challenging at times. There are overt and covert rules. So think about in your family, the rules that are spoken and the ones that go unspoken. Who is in charge? What does that mean for communication? Understanding boundaries. Who are the subsystems? So siblings might be a subsystem, for example. Again, with boundaries, are they rigid? Are they permeable? What does communication look like? We know that stress can really disrupt stable systems. Culture matters. We're going to bring our humility to see how cultural influences the group or family. Sometimes the past is affecting the present. That might be the focus of your intervention. And change is possible if there is a clear and desired path. My number one approach in my experience working with families is that families change together, because we know that there is systems theory work at play and that everyone impacts each other. We can't expect one person to change and then everything will be different. Everyone has to change. Families change together. Okay, looking at working with couples and families. So on the left, we have more of a healthy family system. So semi-permeable boundaries, good communication, aware of their feelings, take ownership. The parents are the main rule makers. Hierarchies are clear and established. In the middle, we have perhaps more behaviors that are dysfunctional. So family members do not take responsibility for their own feelings or actions. There's scapegoating going on. Couples or family members might be unaware of or unwilling to address unfinished business. And then finally, stress. So stress can be situational, also can be predictable. We know that there are stages in the family lifespan that are stressful, and healthy families have the mechanisms to successfully deal with those changes and stressors. So what is our role? There are many different approaches to family counseling and couples counseling. That's why this is usually at that master's or doctoral level. Some people believe that clients should always have individual counseling. Others believe it's always important to have couples and families counseling. What do you think? So this is something to think through for yourself, to get support and supervision around. Under what circumstances would you suggest that a couple seek individual counseling or that individuals seek couples or family therapy? Okay, that was quick. Moving on to group interventions. And family interventions are a type of group intervention. All right, groups, like families, are systems. A lot of the same dynamics are in place. So think about boundaries, think about power dynamics, the hierarchies, homeostasis. Groups will build their own homeostasis, and it's up to the leader to help the new system function in a healthy manner. It's important not to let individual members become scapegoats of the larger system's problems. In the next few minutes with these slides, I taught 410 groups to undergrads, and I'm condensing this whole semester into kind of a review on group work. I love talking about group work in class because our class is a group. It's very meta. It's very parallel process. So while I'm talking, you could think about our class, think about this semester, and our class as a group to think about some of these concepts. We're going to go through each of the stages of group development. So all groups follow a developmental sequential trajectory. Stage 1 is pre-affiliation. So members are testing out whether they belong. They might protect themselves by keeping their distance and not being vulnerable. Unlikely to take risks. So as the leader, when you're in this first stage, what do? You make the group as attractive as possible, allowing and supporting distance, using icebreakers to develop rapport, or opening activities, as I call them. Keeping an eye on how safe are people feeling. Are they sharing more? Are they trusting more? Are they invested yet? Where are we at? Stage 2 is all about power and control. So the character, the culture, the flavor of your group starts to emerge. Alliances might form, patterns of communication, subgroups. Everyone starts to assume their role and get to work on their tasks. They might be asking questions, and power struggles are pretty natural. What's nice about knowing stages of group development is it normalizes your experience as a leader. Sometimes when you see dynamics coming up to the surface, you can say, well, that's okay. This is all part of the process. We're in stage 2, totally natural. Okay, so the group leader is going to give and withhold emotional and material rewards. So we can use social learning theory and reinforcement, provide stronger direction. So leadership is not passive. We're going to talk about the types of leaders, but leadership of a group is active. There's lots and lots of moment-by-moment decision-making with group leadership. The group leader would acknowledge struggles for power, roles assumed, and encourage respectful challenging. Think about our class. Think about Brave Learning Space. And as a leader, the ways that I tried to influence behavior through introducing those concepts early and often. Stage 3 is intimacy. The group might feel like a family. Group leader might be viewed as a parent. Members are openly discussing their views and feelings, making changes, really performing. It feels like a place for growth, a place for self-reflection. There's cohesiveness that might be developing. So group leader at this point is encouraging members to recognize the stage, allow themselves to be the trusted parent, and not in a paternalistic, condescending way, but just owning and being confident in a leadership role type of way, and provide encouragement for shared feelings and views that are respectful. So we're reinforcing vulnerability and growth. All right, stage 4 is differentiation. Members are trying out their new behaviors. Leadership becomes more evenly shared. Communication is effective. Power struggles go down. Everyone's kind of set in their role and supporting one another. Again, we're going to acknowledge what's happening. And it's okay at this point to take a back seat. So at this point, you're letting the group maybe run itself a little bit and encourage members to share their successes and their failures with their new behaviors. And then finally, stage 5, separation. So goals have been achieved. Members have learned new behavioral patterns. Termination is becoming real. There's bittersweet feelings around that. I feel like in week 11, we're here a little bit with our semester. The end is in sight. Some members might regress. Why is that? Think about that. Could be because endings are hard. Could be testing out their role in the group, testing out, is this real? I don't want it to end. I'm going to sabotage. Some people might express anger. Why is that? Again, endings are hard. It brings up a lot for a lot of different people. Group leaders are encouraging members to recognize this stage and have talked about it previously. So termination starts at the beginning. Always begin with the end in mind. And it never should feel abrupt. Helping members evaluate progress. Must be able to let go. Like as leaders ourselves, we have to be able to let go. We're modeling that. Problem solve fears about moving on. Identify resources for the future. And then highlighting strengths as the group and for individual members. Separation stage, very important for closure and integration of everything that's learned into the future. Okay, approaches to leadership. We're going to go through some of these different approaches and the one that I strive for and would encourage you to strive for. Okay, the trait approach. So this philosophy feels that leaders are born that way. So you have it in you or you don't. Some research supports that effective leaders have extroverted traits. They're dominant, they're sensitive, intelligent, enthusiastic, self-confident. Some research suggests that simply the member who talks the most wins the most decisions and therefore becomes the leader. That would fit under this paradigm of the trait approach. I wrote here, unless they talk too much, then what happens? Another way of thinking about leadership positions is the position approach. So leadership is defined by the position they hold. This takes a more authoritative approach. So whoever is in charge is automatically the leader. More formal way of looking at it. Servant leadership. So this is the one that resonates with me personally. Seeks out the needs of the group to determine how best to be of help. How best to help members reach their goals, solve their problems. The focus is on the group members. Decision making is shared, more democratic. And the leader is going to support, encourage, and empower the members. Here's some more concepts about servant leadership specifically. A lot of our direct practice skills that we've talked about this semester, but applying them to a group leader framework. Listening, empathy, healing, so creating that dynamic that is free, I should say fun, and accepting failure as a mean for solving conflicts and problems. So really building truly a brave space. Awareness. So a servant leader is aware, focusing on relationships and how members are thinking and feeling. Conceptualization. So keeping an eye on the prize, looking at long-term goals, looking at vision. Has foresight, so can look ahead and anticipate outcomes. Is a steward. So looks at the obligation to greater society. It's not about control, it's about relationships. Commitment to growth, so validating all members' ideas. Lots of affirmation and validation used. And building community. Believes that community building within the group will extend to other communities. So think about this. Think about this on your career path. Think about this for the leaders in your life. Which ones do you have naturally? Which ones do you want to hone and increase to become a servant leader? I'm trying not to drink my tea into the microphone. Okay, moving on. Group goals. So when you're leading a group members are going to have personal goals and then also the group goal. So individually, you're going to want to know your group members' goals, but then also you're going to want to keep an eye on the group goal. And once you have established the group goal, how committed is everybody to that goal? Relating this back to families that we talked about, working with families. We're going to set group goals with family members too. So you're going to engage the members to set the goals. Just like with any group, we're not setting them for them. We want buy-in, just like our individual practice. So we might interview group members privately. We might have input anonymously to land on long-range and short-range goals. So for this example with a family, the long-range goal is develop strategies to help me communicate effectively with my family. The short range is get through family dinner this week without yelling. That's a nice SMART goal. Develop and assign tasks. So think about our task model we talked about earlier in the semester. We might include contracts. We're going to make these really specific. I will make a meal everyone enjoys. I will avoid talking about work at dinner. Siblings will review progress at the next group meeting. And then evaluate the progress and revise. Okay, leading groups, we want to keep an eye on hidden agendas. So a personal goal held by a member but unknown to other group members. It interferes with the group's efforts. We've all been there. We've been there when other people have hidden agendas that get in the way. So this is a reason we want to make sure that personal goals and group goals align. And we don't want these to be unattended. So if you let a hidden agenda run rampant, then the group loses focus, interest, motivation. And when to confront is tricky. So you only want to confront if it benefits the group, and you're going to seek to understand. So not blaming, shaming, or criticizing. We're going to confront with curiosity if we think it will be helpful. Sometimes hidden agendas are best left alone. So if a group member is not contributing, if they're getting in the way of activities, monopolizing group time, not completing tasks agreed upon, if they are a disruptive group member, there might be a hidden agenda. And there might be benefit in confronting that person one-on-one outside of the group setting or within the group setting. This is the art and science of group leadership. Some more information here on effective goals. Just like with individuals, we want to use those same principles with groups. Our goals are clear, operationally defined, and measurable. Members are bought in. They know that they can meet their goals and the group goals by their tasks they are committed to doing. The goals are viewed as challenging and may fail. So not just low-hanging fruit, but actually meaningful. Resources are available. There's high coordination among group members. And they maintain a cooperative atmosphere, not competitive. Here's more information on that. So cooperative groups, open and honest communication. There's trust, pooling of resources, high cohesion. Cooperative groups foster all of the good stuff that you see here. Competitive groups are more destructive. There might be conflicting personal goals, and members are wanting to see other people fail when it's competitive. And here are all the elements of a competitive group. And I'm sure you all have been at teams at work, you've been in classrooms, you've run treatment groups where you've seen the beauty of a cooperative group with high cohesion and how difficult it can be to overcome competition and low cohesion. Group norms. Okay, norms are rules established by the group. I'm making air quotes, so quote unquote rules. So they might be said or unsaid, written or unwritten, understood or misunderstood, and even known or unknown. Every group has norms. They imply the ought tos. They imply the shoulds for group member behavior. And some norms, we only know about them once they're violated. So think about our class. What are some classroom norms? What might happen if a norm is violated? Conformity. Conformity is yielding to group pressure. There's two types of group conformers. Someone who is expedient, so they inwardly disagree. A true conformer inwardly and outwardly disagrees, or outwardly agrees. Sorry. So an expedient, they might disagree inside, but then they're just going to go with it. True conformer inwardly and outwardly agrees. So in order to conform, a group member must experience conflict between group influence, so the norms we just talked about, and their values. They could announce an independent position or conform by agreeing with the group. There's a lot of research done on conformity, and we know that group pressure influences behavior. Many can be pressured into yielding, which can occur more often when the subject is difficult or subjective. Yielding disappears when people are asked individually and increases with group size. So again, think about your own experiences. When have you yielded to conformity, and did this research apply? Okay, so you have a client and you've completed your assessment, you're working on your case formulation, and should your client see an individual counselor or group counseling or both? So when is group counseling a better choice? One reason for group counseling is financial considerations. This is why HMOs love group therapy. Another reason is individual counseling maybe is no longer providing significant benefit. There's issues related to interpersonal functioning that can be addressed in a group. So in vivo, so think about DBT group, think about interpersonal skills where your client can learn increased interpersonal functioning right there in the group. There's extra support. There's the ability to share experiences with other people in the same situation. The client can test new behaviors in a safe place, and they can learn from the experiences of others with similar challenges. Groups are very powerful. There's so much power in group intervention, and we do not do them just because they save money. That's one reason. But there's also a lot of benefit. Just some ethical considerations when you're thinking about work with couples, families, and groups. We're going to still keep our eye on protecting confidentiality. We can't necessarily ensure a group or family member won't. And so we have to be prepared what to do if confidentiality is broken. So it's a different flavor of informed consent, but still just as important to do lots of informed consent up front with confidentiality. And again, know the limits of your professional competence, seek additional training when you need to, refer out when you need to also. Okay, here ends our online lecture. If you've made it this far, I'm so glad. Thank you. I am thinking about giving extra credit to people who listened this far to the end and who listened to the entire lecture. So maybe come up to me in class next week and let me know one thing you learned from this online lecture. And if you come up to me and say, hey, Chelsea, here's one thing I learned from the lecture, I will give you 1 extra credit point. Because I appreciate you, when we didn't have class in person, listening to this whole talk.